Welcome to the lecture on anger. Anger is a really fascinating level to work at because, similarly to shame, there are a lot of cultural expectations around this emotion. At the same time, this is the level where we get really energized. We are not sitting down in apathy anymore or stay paralyzed like it happens at the level of fear. This is the level where we are ready to act. In this lecture, we will focus mostly on exploring the emotion of anger, as well as on walking you through some of the tendencies women typically have when they encounter this emotion. In psychology, there are several ways to define anger. Anger has been defined as the emotional reaction to being hurt by intentional acts of another person, or as the displeasure joined with a focus on blaming someone else for their actions, or as the reaction to a violation of what we count upon or what we consider to be our standards. Interestingly, there are certain important similarities between the emotion of anger and fear. Both of these emotions tend to mobilize us. If you think of the energy in the voice of a client that resonates in fear and someone who resonates in anger, their voices sound pretty energized. There is a different feel behind that energy, but they do not sound depleted or exhausted as someone resonating at the lower levels. Anger and fear are both a reaction to the occurrence of something negative or threatening. In the language of psychology, it is said that they both arise from an aversive motivational system. If you think of the famous fight or flight phrase, it also shows us that these two emotions are related. There are two different ways of reacting to perceived threat. While fear occurs when there is a threat of harm, anger is a reaction to the actual occurrence that is perceived as harm or something aversive. Now, this is an interesting distinction that has practical implications for us as coaches. Because when we find out our clients resonate in anger, we know that we need to go to their past, immediate or remote, to an event, an encounter, a conversation that has already happened. While with fear, we are looking at what the client perceives as a possibility in their future, a negative, threatening possibility. The reason why it is so important for you to understand the underpinnings of anger is because anger might as well be one of the most problematic emotional experiences for women. The most difficult aspect is the ability to express anger once women feel it. Women are culturally discouraged from expressing anger, which has a lot to do with gender stereotypes. In most cases, women, compared to men, are expected to be nurturing, caring, sensitive, loving, and compassionate, while men are stereotypically expected to be more assertive, independent, and competitive. Compared to men, the gender stereotype roles dictate that women oblige, soothe, nurture, and maintain peace and harmony in interpersonal relationships. These are what we call cultural scripts. This internalization of cultural messages that expect girls and women to always be kind and obedient and never feel negative emotions or have bad thoughts is sometimes referred to as the nice girl syndrome or the nice lady syndrome. The consequences of this syndrome seem to be, among others, that women have a tendency to suppress their anger and find it harder to assert themselves. Because of these cultural scripts, there is no wonder that the direct expression of anger is such a taboo behavior for women. By being an angry woman, we run the risk of social punishment since we are acting in such a contrast to the gender stereotypes. Being angry is socially perceived as unladylike, unfeminine, and sexually unattractive. So how does all of this translate into how women tend to approach and experience anger in practice? Let me now offer you a lot of practical examples from real-life coaching calls that will show you what to pay attention to in order to find out if your client is resonating in anger or if she has some anger in her that needs to be processed. The examples I'm about to offer you are different ways of how women tend to cope with anger. Let's start with containment of anger. Containment of anger means repressing anger, but in a conscious way. In other words, it means that we do not show our anger response outwardly and we hide it inside. However, we are pretty much aware that we are doing this. This is the typical strategy of pretending as if nothing happened. Now, the interesting element here is that the body feels the anger and therefore displays the physiological signs that naturally accompany this emotion, such as raised blood pressure, but also heat spreading throughout our body, chest tightness, etc. In order to contain their anger, the person experiencing it must overpower the physiological reaction by pure will. This is when we bite our tongue or fight back the tears. The next excerpt will show you how Rosa contained her anger.
Well, hello, Miss Rosa. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I just want to say I couldn't even believe how powerful your letters were that you sent to me. I'm actually going to pull them up right now because I didn't print them off, but I got them and I just was immersed. I was just reading them like, oh my gosh, these are good letters.
Oh, I know.
Oh my goodness. So let's start with the Dear Mom and Dad letter because that was the least, but it was powerful. But so how did you feel writing that letter?
Was pretty easy. It was pretty easy because I think I kind of came to terms with it before even writing the letter.
Right.
To some extent. Like, if you saw the letter, it's like, yeah, I had a bunch of issues with them growing up, but I know they were only doing what they thought was best. Yeah. And what? I can't blame my whole life on them. I had a great childhood. I had, I have a great family, great support, great everything. It's just, being a product of immigrant parents.
Yeah.
Coming to a new world, hard for them to adjust. And, they came from a world where they had arranged marriages. So, very difficult
so
for them.
That's what they thought. So it was just really, and do you feel as you were writing it, did you have any emotions when you were writing it? Were there any tears? Was there any anger? Was there sorrow? What do you remember what you were feeling like? Because, I'm all about feeling, because when you can feel something, you can heal it. And if you just stay up in your head thinking about it, you don't feel it in your body, and it's much more difficult to really let go in your being, because I'm very like, here we are, hands-on, real world in reality, but if how we feel deep inside is what really sets the tone for our life.
Right.
So when we hold on to pain, how did you feel when you were doing that?
Initially, it seemed very easy, very free-flowing. And then I think when I got to the part where I wished my mother was a little bit more independent, or, more of a stronger
role model in your life?
A role model. It kind of made me realize, like, if I look at my friends and people now, like, I'm a strong role model to them, ironically, right? So it's just, I wish I had someone like me to guide me when I was little.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of my friends have really strong mothers. So, it's just one of those, I wish. I wonder what my life would have been like if Mom was like this.
Yeah. So what about the part in the letter when you talked about Dad? Just the other day, you hurt my feelings. We were joking about a man who got married at the age of 100, and I said, I still have hope. And you quickly responded, well, he'll want someone around 30. So this is a huge thing in your house. And you jokingly said, well, I guess I can marry someone who's 110 years old. And then, how did that make you feel? Even when you were feeling it, because you wrote, wow, what a slap in the face.
Yeah, and that was the same day we had our last coaching call. So I was kind of emotionally heightened at the time. Mm-hmm. So I think when you told me to write the letter, I kind of said, I don't really need to write a letter to my parents. But then when he said that, it just reinforced that kind of old world mentality. And, a woman's worth is, just really her age or her fertility and her, or her wealth or whatever, but it's not the person inside. So I think he truly believes I've kind of expired from being on the market or potential. And that really made me feel bad. But then I got a little angry. Like unfortunately or fortunately, there was a lot of people there, so I controlled myself. And I didn't really talk about it after because I know with him there's no point.
Of course, there may be situations where it is socially desirable to be able to contain anger. However, for many women, this tendency gets a little bit out of control and eventually they can't communicate their anger even when it's appropriate or desirable. This comes at a price. Studies researching psychosomatic factors show that, for example, breast cancer patients are more likely than controls to have a commitment to prevailing social norms and to the external appearances of being a nice or good person. These patients are more likely than controls to suppress and internalize their feelings, particularly feelings of anger. Another study found a correlation between anger expression and immune response. The more anger suppression, the weaker the immune system. Another way of dealing with anger that we probably see the most typically in women is the segmentation of anger. In this case, people cut their angry selves from the rest of their identity and disown this aspect of themselves. As opposed to containment of anger that we explored a while ago, segmentation is unconscious. Containment and segmentation of anger are probably the reason why many women engage in passive-aggressive behaviors as opposed to direct expression of anger. This goes back to the gender stereotypes that we looked at earlier on. Anger is perceived as a character flaw, and many women don't feel it's okay to be angry. The client you will hear next shared with Crystal during her coaching session that she associates anger with blaming someone else for her circumstances. Now that might be true, but there is far more to anger than just that, and you will see that later. Notice how even after admitting she is angry and feeling good about it for a while, Sonia is instantly ready to move on and leave the place of anger without listening to its messages. She says, "I am angry. Okay, but what's next? I'm angry, but you know what? Let's move on."
Yeah, so you didn't really do what your dad wanted you to do.
No.
And how now do you feel about your mom and dad?
My mother, I felt that she died suddenly. She became ill on Thanksgiving Day, and by January 9th, she died. And angry sounds a little, for me, just strong. But I was upset with her because I felt she was so busy taking care of everybody else that she didn't take care of herself.
That sounds familiar.
And my father, I grew up thinking he was the world. When I end up being responsible for him, I think resentful is the best word I could come up with. I resented who I found out he was.
Because women find it hard to acknowledge that they are feeling anger, you may hear different names as they describe this emotional level. Notice how in Sonia's language, there's a tendency to avoid encountering anger. For example, in the previous excerpt, when she is asked, "How do you feel about your mom and dad?" Sonia replies, "My mother, I felt that she died suddenly." But that's just stating the fact. How did she feel, though? Later, even without being specifically asked if she was angry about her mom's passing, she says spontaneously, "Angry sounds a little strong for me." And the terms that she seems to be okay with are upset and resentful rather than angry. Overall, the emotional level of anger can be described by many different names. Because a lot of women are not comfortable with anger, They won't be comfortable with the word angry either, and will use other words to describe how they feel. They may be okay with words like annoyed, fierce, frustrated. Now here's how things cleared up for Sonia once she completed the letter writing assignment. She was finally able to admit that she was in fact angry. Notice also how fast that cultural script around being a nice girl kicks in when she says that because of being angry, she also feels guilty since this is not the way a daughter should feel about her father.
So now you wrote a letter to your mom, and the end of that letter, what you really got out of it is, let's just finish that thought off. The very end of it, what I got out of writing that letter to my mom, did you get any kind of closure? Did you get any kind of peace? Did you get any kind of insight?
Yes, because I wanted, I don't know if it was communicated there, but what I wanted to do was tell her that I love her, I miss her, I know we had our stuff, but that was okay.
You forgive her.
Yes.
You forgive her.
But then I added something new to be upset with her for because
yes.
You know what?
Because I can't just write the letter and say I love you and it is what it is.
Yes, but I don't know. I think it's in there. But I ended it with and now that I do need you, now you're not around.
Yeah, you suck.
Well, I hope that's not what it said. It was like,
no.
Well, this is just par for
That's just great.
Okay.
I know you would never win Mother of the Year.
Yes.
But like the abused child who still reaches for their mother, I miss you. You do have anger in there. You do have anger in there. And it's totally okay. You have a lot of love. But you do have anger in there, and that's totally okay. It's better to at least acknowledge, because if you don't acknowledge, because the reality is, now let's get to Daddy's letter, what's half a page. How did you feel when you wrote to your dad?
Well, I've been mad. I've been angry with him, and for some reason, I needed to tell him so.
Good.
And
you need
maybe
to know, I'm not judging these letters.
Oh no,
I love them. I think they're fabulous. So when I say that, yes, and you suck, I'm just being bold and outspoken. And now we got to Daddy, and you don't miss him. You feel angry, and how did it feel being able to just say all that stuff?
It felt good. But guilty, because that's not the way a daughter should feel. You know.
What do you do? You do
yes,
feel that way. It's not what you wish.
And I wanted to tell him, because even towards the end, I was getting angrier all the time that was going on. I was getting angrier and angrier, and I wanted him to go.
The feelings of guilt are the basis of another way that women often deal with anger, namely internalization. In the next audio, you will hear how Janet manages to connect with her anger. Notice the quality of her voice as she's listening to Crystal reading out loud the letter she wrote to her mother as part of her coaching assignment.
Yeah, I hear that in you.
Yeah, I am so hard and so cold. My reaction to everything is to turn hard and cold instead of just releasing my emotions.
Yeah.
So I've got to somehow
we're going to do
break
that.
through that.
Yeah, we're going to do that. Because I just want to, dear Mom, I really wish things were different. I'm going to read this out loud, and I just want you to listen and feel whatever comes up for you. Like, does it make you feel sad? Does it make you feel angry? Does it make you feel numb? Does it make you feel emotional? Does it make you feel, what does it make you feel? And does it feel right? Like, when I read this back to you, you know, you came to a retreat. Did you not? You've been to one of my retreats. We've already connected, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, remember we did the truth exercise in the retreat?
Yep.
And what the truth is, and we did that one where we lied for like a minute, and then we told the truth for like a minute, and how easy it was, and how you can feel truth in your body.
Yep.
So I want you to just feel, as I'm reading this to you, is there anything in here that isn't 100% accurate? Anything that you would change if you could? Anything you would say differently? Anything you would add to? So I'm going to read it out loud.
Okay.
Okay. Dear Mom, I really wish things were different. I have begun to realize that I have been trying all my life to please you by being good and trying to do the right thing, whatever that is. I've always been called the good girl, telling Mike, why can't you be more like your sister each time he didn't do what you thought was right? You sheltered me from failure by not encouraging new things, and the sad part is I have done the same thing to Jennifer. I have many issues with Jennifer, and I am beginning to understand why. I've always felt that no matter what I do is never good enough for me to shine in your eyes, yet Jennifer has been very often rude and disrespectful to you, and you are always praising her, telling me how far she's come and how she's a good girl. I have nothing but good and can't seem to get that kind of positive attention from you. When I left home in 1985 to come to Ontario, I left to be with a boyfriend. As soon as you heard that we separated, you immediately came here as if I couldn't do it without you. From there, you stayed with me for many years, and once you felt I was settled with another man, got married and had children, you decided you guys would live on your own for a while. When you came to live with me after you retired, you said, it's just for a couple of months, and would move home and come see me during the summer. You said, without asking how I felt, you said that you guys would live with me for a few months out of the year and Mike the rest. Not what I wanted, but I didn't want to hurt you by saying no. I was just enjoying living on my own for only a few months when you called and said, Jan, we are coming back. Apparently Mike's wife, Linda, doesn't want you there and kicked you out, or that's what you told me. And once again, you were back living with me. And I didn't want it, but I felt, where else will they go? So I ended up never really living on my own and thought you guys would live with me forever. So I didn't speak to my brother for 4 years because of how you handled this. I was angry with him for leaving this with me, even though you carried on with him as if nothing happened. I felt you did this whole thing just because you didn't feel I was capable of bringing up my own kids. Boy, was I angry. But I didn't say anything because I felt, where will they go if I don't take care of them? So you lived with me for 4 years, and boy, did that impact my relationship with Jennifer. You were always picking up for her and criticizing Jessica every second you could. Jennifer changed completely when you left for the better. It seems those who work the hardest get the least amount of attention from you. Last year when you came for a visit, you said you will visit us every other year. I said, Dad is 72 years old. He can't continue to drive here. And you said, well, he will never get on an airplane. So I told you that when I start making more money, I will buy you an airplane ticket to come see me anytime you wanted. And you laughed and said, how do you plan on doing that? And I said, once I complete my life coach program. Response, oh, good for you.
Yeah, everything in there is truth. But do you see a pattern?
Do you?
I feel myself getting angry when you were reading it. Because
what
all
were you
those
feeling?
things, like, it's just like every time I tried to be on my own, she was there. Did you notice that? I mean, it's only twice.
That's what you're right. Yep. Yeah.
Right? So she was there. And she, you know, when I take a look at Jennifer and my brother, I mean, my brother is doing well today, but for many, many years, like, you know, he took whatever he could from them, you know? He just kept taking and taking and taking.
Like what kind of stuff? What do you mean taking what?
Money, the house, whatever, you know. There was that whole situation where, you know, they signed their house over to him with nowhere for them to go. But they signed it over because she felt that, well, the house was always in their name, but then my brother lived in it for many, many years. So any repairs that needed to be done, he would do them. So she felt obligated to sign it over to them, even though they weren't gone yet. They're not dead. They're still alive. They still needed somewhere to live.
And so there's nothing for you?
No, but she said that, well, anyways, the house is not worth. It's in a little community in Newfoundland. It's not about the house. It was about how she found a way to get back here, and I believe it was all lies. She found a way to get back here because she didn't want me living on my own.
Now, despite finally connecting with her anger, later on in the session, Janet slips back into guilt by saying, Don't you think it's awfully selfish of me as a mother and as a daughter to look at that and say, why is she always concerned about my daughter Jennifer and not about me? Let me finish this segment by saying that another strategy for dealing with anger that women as well as men often apply is displacement. That is, expressing one's anger where it feels safe to do so, as opposed to where it is appropriate to do so. In practical terms, this means that we end up snapping at someone who hasn't really done anything when we are really angry at someone else. Or we might use something that is okay to be angry about with a person, while in reality we are angry about something else entirely, but we are afraid to admit it directly. In the next excerpt, the client has some anger towards her ex-husband that she left a couple of years ago. She believes that the issue she is having is that her ex-partner is hurting their children.
Yeah, I hear you. So it's 2 years later now, and where are you at?
Well, I'm emotionally, it's been really, really hard because, I have 3 beautiful children,
yeah.
And I'm very, very close to them. They're not as close to him as they are to me,
yeah.
And it hurts me when he does not serve them well. And lately, it's been really, really tough. I mean, for instance, I'll just give you an example. He's dating somebody, as I said, and my son comes home every once in a while. And, he stays at the house, which I think is an okay thing to do, certainly would be if I were there. But so he just told my son a couple of days ago that he didn't want him there, that Kimberly didn't feel comfortable in having him. She wouldn't even meet the children. It's just such a bad situation,
yeah.
And he really hurts a lot. But
and when he says stay there, does he mean live there? What does he mean?
No, he meant just stay. Like he asked him if he was going to be around on Friday and Saturday, that he would prefer not being there. Alex is only up here for 3 or 4 days, and he's. Thank God.
So okay, yeah. So let me understand. This is like I'm just coming home to visit my dad, and his dad says, my new girlfriend isn't comfortable having you in the house, so you can't stay here.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, and that really hurt you.
Now, as a note here, this client's son is in his mid-30s, so he's an adult man. It sounds like it does not feel safe for this client to be angry with her ex-husband because of how he's behaving towards her, but it's okay to be angry when it comes to his behavior towards their children. Focusing on her children allows her to bypass the anger she feels towards her husband regardless of how he behaves towards their children, and allows her to ignore the pain that exists in the connection between her and her ex. We have covered a lot of information around anger in this lecture. My hope is that it will help you identify the emotion of anger in your clients, especially now that you know that it's a culturally difficult emotion to have. Let me remind you that there is another lecture called Anger Interventions, where we will focus on the practical steps you can follow with a client that is resonating at this emotional level. Until next time, bye-bye.